Awesome. Welcome everyone back to another episode of the Diverse Podcast, the #1 careers podcast on the planet. I'm joined today by Sharon Frost, who's the Global HR Director at Oxford PharmaGenesis. Welcome, Sharon. How are you getting on?
Hi, Toby. I'm really good and I'm really pleased to be here today. Thank you for the invite.
Fantastic. Let's dive right in. You've got a wealth of HR experience. Just before this, I was diving into your LinkedIn to see a little bit more about what you've done. I completely lost count of the number of years experience you have. So really looking forward to the lessons and things that we can take away from today. Would you mind giving us a quick overview about yourself and your background?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I've got lots of experience because, of course, I'm old. So that's some of the reason. But yeah, I went to university actually with a 99% numerate ability and was very much likely to become an accountant in my mind. And I was doing a business administration degree that had all of the various aspects of business and fell in love with HR immediately. Just the diversity of, two cases looking really similar but ending up being investigated and coming out with very different outcomes. I found the level of curiosity that's required really quite enlightening, and of course the opportunity to be able to work and support people was something that really floated my boat too. So I have a very eclectic background in terms of industry. I started in supermarket retail with the Sainsbury's Group. I then moved on to entertainment distribution with EDI, Warner Music and Sony. So that was a really interesting role and lots of perks at, events like, MBAs and the Brits, etc. And then I moved on to work in private equity with private education background, marketing services, guardianship. And now I find myself here at Oxford PharmaGenesis. And obviously I've covered all aspects of HR and all levels of seniority. So broadly, I've been there and done it, but still always ever evolving and lots of opportunity to taste new aspects of HR as the world of work evolves as well. So constantly interested. I'm sure you can tell I'm still very interested in my subject matter.
Absolutely. Yeah, that passion definitely comes through. And I was going to say, I bet you've seen it all by now, but I guess when it's people, it's always changing. And, everyone's different, right? So you've always got new challenges and, HR is ever evolving in that sense.
Absolutely. I mean, we never could have predicted COVID and what that was at the time and the ramifications since. But, human beings are very complex characters and never cease to surprise us. We never cease to surprise ourselves. So why would we be surprised by others as well when we don't know as much about them? So, and, constantly being challenged to make work an even better place and, dovetail with life. So, subject matters like EDI and well-being weren't even considered when I started out in HR nearly 30 years ago. So, again, quite significant changes that challenge and positively stretch us HR professionals.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I want to get into that change actually. But firstly, for context, for anyone who's new to hearing about Oxford Pharma, would you be able to give a bit of an overview, a bit of an introduction as well to the agency as a whole?
Yeah, so we principally employ medical researchers and writers. So essentially, we're trying to make the kind of medical language much plainer and simpler, essentially for the patients. The medical profession does have lots of complex language and so getting through the science and keeping it as simple as possible just unlocks it for patient needs as well. And we do many more aspects. There's a huge array of offerings, so we actually are able to offer really wide varied careers to people that can, if they're interested in being more creative or more data driven, there's different aspects for them as well. We have probably the widest expanse of opportunity for people in our sector, I think.
I think it's really interesting, medical communications. It's one of those industries that I kind of stumbled into and discovered, and a lot of people aren't aware that we need to sort of market and communicate medical information and health related information in a certain way, and it's not all done by necessarily the pharmaceutical companies. There's other agencies involved that are helping with that process. So if you're interested in marketing and also science and health, it's a great area to look into, and not a lot of people are aware of it. So that's maybe the first thing off the top. If anyone's new to medcoms, is definitely to check it out and see if it's interesting to you as well.
Definitely. I mean, if you have that science background and you don't want to be in a lab for the rest of your life, we're definitely an organisation to reach out to.
Definitely. And let's talk a little bit more about DE&I then. So first of all, what does DE&I mean to you individually? What do you think when you think of DE&I?
Well, for me, diversity in particular aligns to our long-standing company philosophy, because we state that to excel as a team, you need to bring out the best in each other, to communicate openly and respectfully, and create a supportive and diverse and rewarding workplace. And I think it's about being all inclusive in that regard. And we're committed to being as inclusive as we can. So we formalised a sort of oversight committee about 3 years ago now, and both the CEO, Chris Winchester, and myself are board sponsors to really keep it topical at the highest level in our organisation and demonstrate its significance as well.
Definitely. And I think lots of organisations are keen to get it right, but maybe don't always know where to start and what to do, and they don't want to be seen to get it wrong at all, and they want to be inclusive obviously with their practices. So are there any particular strategies or tactics that you've put in place or initiatives internally that you think have worked really well?
Definitely. And we were certainly on that path of not wanting to get it wrong, and not being experts, and not having the confidence, etc. So we reached out to an external consultant initially, someone that could really support us on a number of projects, because we wanted to launch something that became part of our DNA, and not a one-off initiative, but something that could be embedded and weaved into our overall sort of caring and nurturing culture. So she started off with a brilliant example of doing a listening exercise and really involving people that either had a passion, allyship, or actually knowledge around EDI topics. And that helped to then create our very first EDI survey, but she ran a couple of surveys for us until we felt that we built trust directly with our colleagues. She also supported us as a panelist in a diversity session with the International Society of Medical Public Professionals, and that's the ISMAP, that's one of our industry kind of awarding bodies. But our overall approach to EDI, as she kicked off, was a listening exercise. It's continued to be very employee driven. So we have very passionate people that want to enact change. That's why they're at Oxford PharmaGenesis, to make a difference. And we want to harness that energy that they have by listening and collaborating with them, particularly on lived, or sort of secondary lived experiences, if you like. And then they feed into our ideas and give feedback on our ideas as well. They've also been quite passionate about making sure that anything that we do is not just internally focused, but also looking at our external efforts to affect change in the wider industry and community at large. And I suppose that's because that's what their day job is, that it's important to them that there is that holistic approach as well. So yeah, we rely quite heavily on our employees to help shape things.
Yeah, I think that's a really important aspect, and I like what you said at the beginning, which is you really started with listening, because I think we have a lot of employers ask, they say, we don't know where to start, we don't know how to ask people to get involved, we don't know how to ask for data, and the most authentic way, I think, in the beginning is to involve as many people as possible, have them as part of the decision-making committee, and have the employees lead what the DE&I initiatives actually are, because inclusion is really about including everybody. I think sometimes we think about it and we think, oh, it's about just ethnic diversity, or it's just about this, or it's just about that. But no, actually it's about including everyone, which is why, to your point, it needs to be embedded into the business. And we've perhaps spoken about this on a previous episode. I think it's important to bring up. It's what we see sometimes with DE&I is these very project driven approaches where it's a bit of a one-off, and something happens in the news and then we do something about it, or it's a particular month and we just celebrate it for a month and that's it. Whereas we don't approach any other functions like that. You wouldn't think about HR or marketing in that way. You'd have like a North Star that you'd be looking to get to, and then you'd build your strategy on insights and data. And I like the listening, because it's not just about the quantitative data, it's about having those conversations. And I think sometimes as well that helps, because as you mentioned, everyone is different, right? We can't put people in boxes, so we have to listen and hear what their perspective is in order to decide the best way forward, I think. And for you, I think a lot of employers, obviously, well, there's varying ranges, I think, in terms of the employers that we talk to, in terms of where they're at with their journey and what they want to accomplish. For some, there's still a question around, the need to focus on DE&I and, what the results will be. So for you, do you have a view to why you think this is really important, and what you think the positive outcomes are when you focus on both diversity and equity and inclusion?
Well, I just think it's that sense of belonging and everyone feeling like they've got their part to play. I always think about that. We don't know if it's true or not, but that conversation about, some important person asking a cleaner at NASA what they were doing, and they said, well, I'm putting a man on the moon. And, teamwork, for me, we all have an equal part to play. I constantly talk about you can't drive a car without oil in the engine. It's not about, Hamilton at the helm of the wheel, etc. And I think, creating that environment needs to be one that's well informed, and it, like you said, it's not a one-off project. It becomes part and parcel of the way we do things, and it's cultural, and that has to be authentic and lived and breathed every day. And you can only do that if you really do listen and hear and understand the different perspectives. Again, my example of why I got into HR, you can look at two, potential disciplinaries and end up with different results. Well, you can hear two, people with what appears to be a similar background, and then they have very different lived experiences. And, we can only provide support if we've got that trusting relationship where people are prepared to share and help us evolve our support offering to make life and work an even better place for them, and educating ourselves and others along the way as well, because things evolve and change as time goes on as well. What's acceptable from a language point of view 20 years ago probably isn't now. The way people talk about things and how much people are prepared to share has also evolved. So we need to move and educate and listen to be able to adapt to all of those things.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to have focused on that first, because I think a lot of organizations are really thinking, okay, how do we increase diversity? How do we recruit more diverse talent? But if you don't think firstly about the inclusion, then you're going to lose a lot of that talent, even if you are able to attract them, right? Because, and also I think it's you're going to be able to attract more diversity if you have a more inclusive recruitment process, and hiring managers understand, the need for certain initiatives and the need for recruiting in a new way, potentially it's different from previous strategies, and being very inclusive. Have there been any recruitment strategies that you've put in place that you think are working well in terms of that focus on diversity? Obviously we've been partnering together at Diverse, but so anything that you'd share on the recruitment side of things that employers could take away from?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly implemented some training that's also helped with education and understanding and process, so that we're actually doing what we say we will as well. So quite a range of EDI related training resources that are relevant. So we do a bystander intervention training, we do interview awareness, a kind of classic EDI training program, and then unconscious bias for hiring managers, which is a very interactive course for people to really kind of do some self-reflection as well, and then also disability awareness training as well. So I think all of those things just help people see things differently, and I think most of the time it's also helping people understand just the simple, keep it simple. If you just recruited, if your team is 10 people and you only recruited people just like you, when you're posed with a problem, you're probably all going to think there's only one solution because you've all got the same view. Whereas if you have, diversity of thought and background and, all those other component parts, you could have more than 10 different ideas to resolve that problem. And I think people are much more aware that, like you said at the beginning, diversity is so wide ranging. It's not, just around one of the protected characteristics, and it's actually beyond protected characteristics in my view, and in the view therefore that we operate at Oxford PharmaGenesis. Obviously we have taken steps to improve recruiting from a more diverse pool and talent for all of those reasons, and we've, as you said, partnered with yourselves. We're really excited about that, particularly focusing on entry level and graduates from minority ethnic groups, but also other underrepresented groups as well. And our recruitment process has already been adapted to incorporate recruiting people with disabilities, for example, guaranteeing them an interview if they tick all the boxes on the essential role criteria, offering them opportunity for more accessibility through the process and making reasonable adjustments. And actually recently we were awarded Disability Confident Committed Employer status, and we've very recently been accredited with being a menopause friendly employer as well. So trying to appeal to a whole variety of different people in conjunction with our work with you guys at Diverse.
I love that. Yeah, and I think you touched on the benefits there of diversity in terms of thoughts and opinions. And I had a really quote that I liked that was around the most successful teams, the best ideas come at the edge of reason, which you can only get to when you have diversity in thought and opinion to push each other, right? Otherwise you just don't end up agreeing, and you don't really push yourself to innovation. Yeah. So I think that's a massive benefit, and sometimes it's a little bit uncomfortable to think, no, I've got to hire, so I should look to hire someone who maybe isn't from the same university as me, maybe isn't from the same background, who maybe I don't usually hang around with, but there's a huge amount you can learn. And I think same for the candidates as well. I think we tell them a lot of the times that they might be going into an industry that isn't very diverse, where they might not meet anyone who's from their background, but there's still a hell of a lot to learn from, and maybe even more to learn from people that are from very different backgrounds to you as well. You mentioned at the beginning there the sort of change that we've seen with DE&I. Walk me through that, because obviously you've got a wealth of experience here. The beginning, towards the beginning of your career, what were the conversations like around DE&I, or was it not on the table at all? And how has that changed?
No, I mean, certainly, years ago it wasn't a subject, that was a matter of discussion. I think the George Floyd incident created a dialogue at Oxford PharmaGenesis. And I was very opinionated about making sure we did things in a particular way. I was brought up with my elder sister was heavily disabled, and so I had quite clear views about authenticity and having some knowledge and doing things with good intent, but involving people with lived experiences, etc. as well. And so that's why we took the more sort of cautionary approach. We were very internal with our messaging around that. We didn't do a big splash externally about supporting it, because that for me, the authenticity was saying, do you know what, this is a wake-up call to us to say we could be better as an organization, and we want to be better, so help us, let's work together, rather than kind of saying, oh, we're in support of something that's happening out there. Actually put action speak louder than words. So that's the approach that we took.
Yeah, that's the most authentic way, I think, isn't it? Start by doing something, and then your first step in terms of announcing your DE&I initiatives and what your motivations or your statement is to talk about what you've done already. That's really the most, I think, authentic way to approach it, because I think applicants and people that are looking for organizations that are committed to DE&I, they've got past the bar has been raised from just having a diversity statement, right? The bar is a lot higher than that now, and I think people are very socially conscious and aware if they don't feel that those statements are being backed up with action. And Do you have any advice on that for the young listeners that we have that are interested in finding employers that are, you know, really focused on and committed to diversity and inclusion? Is there a way, I'm not sure if it's in the application process, recruitment process, or maybe it's questions you can ask, you know, when you get into the office? Is there any advice you have on that?
Yeah, because I'm really an advocate of think big but start small. And I, again, I know I'm repeating it, but authenticity is key. And I think when you think big but start small, there is that kind of grounding and substance to what you're doing. So I would definitely, I would encourage candidates to ask, an employer to describe where they feel they're at EDI, or what their journey has been, so they can get a sense of the direction of travel and the approach that people are taking. If I was asked that question, I would certainly be talking about, not wanting to do it wrong and getting an expert in to help us initially, and listening and engaging with our people. And we there'll be plenty of organizations in the world that have got further along the journey than us, but we're doing it at a pace that is right within our organization, and is working, and is, it's got rigor to it, and it's, digestible by everybody, because we're trying to bring everyone along. It's not about supporting a particular group. It's about making sure everybody understands and learns something along the way. So sometimes it can be quite small pieces of information. We do some education pieces every month, and they can be some of them can be quite large, and some of them can be quite small, but it encourages a conversation, and people say, next time you do that, I'd be happy to help. Brilliant. That's our way of kind of reaching out and connecting with some of our people to just constantly evolve it. And as I said before, this isn't a project, this is part of our weaving it into our culture. And so we're going to continue doing these things, and they will get bigger and better. And I think really understanding the commitment by understanding the journey that an organization has been on, and its direction of travel, I think will really help people get a sense of whether it's going to be an organization that can work for them as well.
Yeah, and I think that intent is really important, isn't it? Having that, because it's a constant journey. I think this is something that, again, is a misconception about DE&I. It's an ongoing thing because it's so integrated to people who, as we said, that their needs and people's sort of perspectives and everything changes year on year, right? So it kind of constantly evolves, and we need to sort of adapt to it. So it's not something that you can complete and it's there and it's done. So I think candidates should also perhaps bear that in mind as well, where an organization might not have it all wrapped up, everything is perfect, but they're at least have the buy-in from senior leadership and support, and they're trying their best as well, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that I'd really want to let your candidates know is that people that haven't had it easy have actually got quite a lot to offer. So when you're working in an organization like ours, and you're dealing with clients, pharma clients, resilience is a massive skill that we need of our people. And when you've had to battle to be heard, or be in a particular group that may not be representative of you on the face of it, or what have you, then you've really got something to call upon in terms of areas like skills in resilience and such like. Just thinking about some of the experiences that I witnessed my sister go through. I was constantly saying, I wish I could be like you, because she was so strong, and she was able to handle situations that I didn't think I would be able to. So just making sure that people see the strength that they have as a result of their lived experience, and projecting that, I think, would go a long way. It's the number one skill we seek out is resilience.
That's really powerful. That's really interesting that you say that, because I think a lot of people obviously don't have that experience that you had with your sister. Is there anything else that you learned that you would share with anyone who perhaps doesn't have that perspective of, as you said, of growing up with someone who has that severe disability, that you learned that you think could be a misconception, or just a lesson that you learned that you think is important to share?
Well, one of the things that I love about where we're at in the world right now is that I do think people are more willing to share their lived experiences, to explain kind of their background, or and just help educate others, and gain that kind of understanding. But as I said, respecting that actually you bring a lot of skills to the table that people that haven't had that, don't, and they're quite often skills that we're looking for, because the world of work is, in the last 3 or 4 years, has changed more than in decades before it, and so the skill set that we need from people now is evolving, and I think, remember that there's some strength there, to be able to project as a result of of going through a different life experience.
Yeah, I think it's really powerful because a lot of, we speak to a lot of young people who've been through some really challenging things, and they sort of try and sweep it under the rug and try and forget about it
Yeah,
and move on. And they say, "Oh, I've got no experience," but really they do have experience, and they've maybe have experience that's really valuable, because it might not be formal work experience, but it might have given you, as you said, the resilience, the sort of the problem solving, and the this sort of harden you to things that, when you actually get to the corporate world, might actually be a little bit easier than what you've dealt with in some ways.
definitely. I mean, you think about someone that comes from a low income family background, they're probably the best at keeping to budget, so
Mm.
again, you can turn something that might feel less than positive into a real positive strength that organizations are seeking out. So it's just, it's thinking about what an organization wants and how can I demonstrate I've been able to fulfill that. You might not have a worked experience of being managing a budget, but you have in your life, and if you didn't have much money, then you've done a better job than someone that, where it was plentiful.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've never heard that before, but yeah, I think that's a fantastic way of looking at it. A fantastic point. Is there anything else that sort of has really surprised you? I'm just imagining you must have seen so much and heard so much in your career in HR. Is there anything that around, people that surprises you in the world of work that you think has really stood out over the course of your career?
I mean, not really, because I'm just curious about people, and I don't get shocked very easily. So I kind of don't go, oh wow, that was a real thing, because I love learning, and I love hearing other people's stories and understanding their perspective, whether it's a different language or religion or whatever it is. And I think the power of multiple diverse different thoughts is what gets us to goal. And I do truly believe that if you've not had it easy, you're probably bringing more to the table, in terms of skill set as well. So, for me, that is the number one message I want your candidates to hear, that, they will have some significant strengths above, candidates that have maybe had it easier. So please turn some of that into real positive conversation in an interview situation.
Definitely, I think that's a big takeaway for me as well. So,
Mm.
for the listeners there, I think really be prideful of any experience that you do have, whether it's formal or not. If it's caring responsibilities, if it's projects you've done in your own time. I think those show some really great values that lots of employers are looking for right now. So, yeah, lots of fantastic lessons in there. Is there anything else that you want to share? Any other advice that you'd like to leave the listeners with? Could be, yeah, just any young person out there. I mean, just for context, it's been a challenging year, I think, with the economy, in terms of cost of living on one side, but also headcount in some ways, and opportunities there. And you know if you're a student or a graduate, it's very, very competitive. We're doing this podcast right now in September, where you've got a lot of grad schemes and internships that are live that are very competitive. And so when you
Mm.
combine all of those things, what you sort of you get is a lot of failed applications, a lot of rejections at interview stages, and it's often difficult to bounce back from that and keep going. So not sure if you've got any advice. It could be for someone specifically in HR, or just generally young people out there that are listening.
If you're getting lots of rejections, I mean, obviously it's economically it's a tougher time. So one, don't take it too personally. If you've gone through, a fair chunk of the process, ask for some feedback. If it's just you've sent in your CV and you've got rejection, you're unlikely to. But if you've had a first or especially a second interview, a reputable employer should be giving you some constructive feedback. And there was a third. What was the other thing I was going to say to you? Oh, it's gone. Um, yeah, it's gone. It'll come back.
No worries. No worries. So, really getting that feedback. And yeah, you're right. Not always employers can do that, but when they do, and if they put effort into it, that can make all the difference in the world, can't it? So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
getting
come
that
back.
feedback along.
So the
Oh, it's come
third
back.
one, it's come back. The third one was try not to write the same application for every job. Think, and be quite curious yourself, and have a kind of conversation with maybe the recruiter in advance of even making the application, or try and look at some of the things that the organization is doing, because if someone reached out to one of our recruiters and said, what are the key skills you're looking for, resilience would come up there. If they were applying to be a project manager, then obviously the candidate would know they need to manage budgets, and adapt your application for the organization and or the job that you're applying for. It doesn't mean rewriting your CV and fundamentally rewriting your offer letter, but you do need to make it look like you really want that job at that company, and not just you've sent out 20 CVs and cover letters to 20 different organizations across different industries, etc. So I think when an organization can sense you really want this job, you've made that kind of quite bespoke approach, then there'll be a little bit more wriggle room than a candidate that's clearly just printed off one of 20.
Yeah, because you see those horror stories on LinkedIn, like, oh, I applied to 1,000 jobs and I didn't hear back from anyone, and you think actually maybe that is the problem. Maybe it's too many
Yeah,
applications and they're not specific enough. And because
yeah,
from what we see in terms of candidates is the candidates that tend to get the furthest in the application processes are the ones that listen to podcasts like this one, or that go to live events with employers, hear directly from employers. They pick up on a couple of things which helps them understand a little bit more about who the employer actually is, rather than
yeah.
just looking at a job description for half an hour or whatever it is. And then that leads to a much more informed application. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the starting point. If you really want the job, you got to show it by turning up really at any of these sessions and doing
Yeah.
your research, networking if you can, and going above and beyond with your application. So
Mm-hmm.
brilliant. Yeah. And I guess I'm curious as well, if someone is about to start a career in HR, do you have any advice for them in terms of, once I get into the business, is there certain traits that you think are really important, or some tactics that you've picked up that you think, I wish I knew that at the beginning of my HR career?
I mean, my HR career has changed so much. Then when I started out, it was obviously very different. I was very, kind of wet behind the ears, had this little checklist of all the things I wanted to complete because I was studying as well at the same time. I think, people can be quite confused and say, I really like people, so I want to get into HR. But HR is actually quite a tough gig, because most of the time, you're dealing with the challenging situations, so it's not all fun. So actually, again, resilience is one of the number one skills and competencies that we're looking for. There's a lot of structure, but don't be afraid to say, I'm interested in policies, or I'm really interested in this area, etc., because there's so much diversity within HR. It's the thing that drew me in, for sure. You're never bored if you're in HR. That's definitely the case. But I think you need to be a curious person, because essentially you will be juggling lots of balls, and probably move from one theme of HR to another over time. So yeah, I couldn't exude more excitement about a career in HR to your candidates.
Love it, love it. Well, that's incredible. This has been a really interesting conversation for me. I've really enjoyed it as well. You've been fantastic to talk to. So hopefully we can do this again at some point. For anyone listening, please do go and check out Oxford Pharma's roles and the events that we're doing together, because I think it's a fantastic organization. They're really focused on DE&I, and they've got some incredible opportunities. And many of you probably haven't thought about medical communications before, but it's a really, really exciting industry with some incredible opportunities. So I'll leave a link in the description to obviously our website. We'll be showcasing some of their junior and entry level roles, but obviously check out their website as well for if you're looking for more senior positions as well. So Sharon, again, thanks so much for coming on, because we really do rely on people like you to give up some time, share your advice, be really honest, and help us all get better. So thanks so much for that.
Brilliant. Thanks for inviting me. I've enjoyed it too, Toby.